Hello, everybody. My name is Sarana Riggs. Can you hear me pretty good? Yes. Okay, I'm speaking more louder than usual. Again, my name is Sarana. I am from the Navajo tribe, and that is located on the map there. And originally, I'm from Big Mountain, which is near the Hopi Mesas on Black Mesa. And my clans are Chishidane, which is my mother's clan, Charico Apache. Glizathlana is mini goats, and that's my dad's clan. Ashihi, salt, which was my paternal grandfather. And Twitterjitni, bitter water, which is my dad's grandfather. Yeah, I had that right. Anyways, so I'm here to talk about of course, we're all here for the book here. And sorry, I'm nervous, I haven't talked in a while. I think that for myself, looking at these two books here, and I've had the opportunity to actually study, read, observe, look through the pages of both books. I know it's pretty hard to find, and I know it's a rarity to come across these books, but one of these days I went into one of the river guides' office, and I was going to ask a question about a recent trip I went on and how to get support for Native students. And she asked me, like, what are you doing? What are you doing nowadays since you left the job that you currently were in? And I told her I was asked to speak on the book here. And she said, oh. And I looked up, and just on top of the file cabinet, collecting dust, were these two books. And it took me as a surprise, and it also took me as a sign that for me to be here to talk about the indigenous perspective of the Grand Canyon and myself as a Diné Navajo person, and bring that here. My line of work before I left the nonprofit I was working at was environmental education, talking about the issues on the Navajo Nation and the surrounding Grand Canyon, because we have threats up there like uranium mining, current uranium mining, water shortage, talking about water usage, and not only that, talking about developments that come onto the Grand Canyon and how they're intrusive or they're culturally disrespectful. And then we also look beyond the Grand Canyon because we have to, and we look at all the people that are associated with the Grand Canyon and how they're impacted. I'm talking about indigenous people and those tribes and the ones that live further out, because we view Grand Canyon as our place of origin, and we view it as a place where when we pass on, we go back into those canyons and we live there and we stay there. We go back to our relatives, our ancestors that are there waiting for us. And then that knowledge, we look at our own origin and our placement of being in Grand Canyon. And for myself, as a Diné, we look at the origin story of how we were created, when we were created. And it's interesting, my first river trip, when I was there, I was a guest talking about the confluence issue because it was an Escalade, a tram that was supposed to go into the Grand Canyon. And my very first experience of being on the river within the canyon was just exactly how Dutton talks about the canyon itself and the surrounding landscape. I could not have said those words any better than he did. And it was beyond words. It was a feeling that you're going back into time, a feeling more and more into the canyon, a feeling of going further and back in time, further, further, further. And at the same time, I realized in my own Diné culture, my teachings, that I was witnessing something that was really profound. And it kind of reminds me of if you were to go like like in the Bible, if you were to go back and you see something that confirms, that religion there. For me, it was the same thing. And in my teachings is that the first world we live in was the black world, and it was dark And there was really nothing living there at the time, and it was just spirit beings, and it was just really black. And it reminds me of the furthest part of the canyon, where it's that granite and it's that dark rock that's down there. And it reminded me of that, and it reminded me of the next world, and it reminded me of all the other worlds that we came out of, and we're in the fourth world right now, and it's the white glittering world. But the colors of blue, with the blue world and the yellow world, were there in front of me, and the beings and the layers and the organisms that lived within each world reminded me of how we came into being. Of there was spirits, there was insects, there was animals, and there's us, and that's evident there too. And it just really blew my mind being there, and it gave me more sense of why this place has to be protected, why we look at this place as Indigenous as being home, and how we connect to it, no matter how far away we are. And I think about all the tribes that are connected to this place of the Grand Canyon. I have to cheat and look at my notes here. So some of the tribes that we have there are the Hopi tribe, and we even have Zuni that's way far away in New Mexico. We have the different bands of Paiute. We have San Juan Southern Paiute, Kaibab Paiute, Las Vegas Band of Paiute, Moapa Band of Paiute, and the Paiutes, different Paiute Utes of Utah. And then we have the Pai tribes, Havasupai, Wallapai, Yavapai, and of course Apache. You know, we only see this Apache part here, but there's more, more of my Apache relatives that connect to this area. And of course, as Dene, we're there too. And so looking at that, you know, it's, like I said, it's bigger than this. We have tribes that are down in the southern area. We have tribes that connect from the California area, Nevada area, and going Utah, Colorado, like further, who see this as something that's really significant and powerful to them. And you know, going back to the book, you know, Dutton talked a lot about the landscape and the area surrounding it. And reading this, you know, I could see in my mind where he was talking about and all the places that he referenced. And I could see that, and I could also see all the different people that could be in in these passages here. And that's, you know, for me, that's my own perspective of this book. And other things he talked about with the Grand Canyon and surrounding the Grand Canyon was, you know, there's little descriptions about the geology. I thought about minerals and what's my input to this book, and how can I talk about it from my perspective. And I looked at the geology of it, and I thought, okay, geology, well, the different layers of rocks and the different minerals that are there, we use some of those minerals that are that are in the surrounding landscape. We use them for ceremony. They have a reference to us, and we use them in different ways and different things. And we have to collect these different rocks. And for us as Indigenous people, you know, like I said, they're special. So we have to go out to these places and collect these different minerals for our ceremonial purposes. And then he mentioned a little bit about you know, the environment and plants and the trees that he saw, and I thought the same thing. Okay, you know, those are things that we utilize. We utilize the landscape for our own personal needs to build homes and many other uses. And they're part of our other creation stories too, on how we got to the next world and how we utilized different plants also for ceremonial uses, for medicinal uses, and to heal us, and all of that. And even like during COVID times right now, we use those same plants that are out there to heal us and to to get us in the right space, and to, we look at sage, everybody knows what sage is, and that cleanses us, and that calms us, and that puts us in a spiritual, in an okay place. And so going further along in the book, and I was seeing the different ways that I could talk about the indigenous ideas and thoughts around it. And so going further into the book, we talked about, there was a little bit mention of lava, and one thing that I had talked about with students as we're going through the canyon is there's stories that pertain to lava in Diné creation. In my own story, I'm not going to speak for other tribes, but for Diné, it is when we talk about deities and the tribulations and trials that we went through, I think of the hero twins and the monsters that they fought out there on Dineta, and I think about the stories that my grandfather said about these heroes fighting the monsters, and as they pierced them, the blood that came out of them was what is now remnants of lava. And there's a whole background story to that. And I also think about a colleague of mine, Autumn Gillard from Kaibab Paiute, and she mentioned the lava flow from Mount Trumbull, and in their origin, in their history, and in the petroglyphs that depict this, is that in their story, in their songs, they talk about that lava flow. And some people are like, no, that's not, it's hard to believe about that. But again, I talked about how we have a creation story, and it talks about those different geology times of rocks and how different beings lived in there. But I also look at that story of her ancestry and the songs portrayed there of that lava flow coming out, and how they connected to it, and how special and sacred it was to them, and how they also used the heat from that to cook and to cook pottery, and to use it as a kiln. And so I thought that was very spectacular, and I couldn't believe that. But I also think about like Sunset Crater, and how there's also like corncob impressions in that time where there was a lava flow. So again, going back to the book, it just seems, I really tried hard to like provide some type of perspective in a way that says that we have been here forever. We have been here since time immemorial, and we have origin stories. We have a depiction of who we are, and we have generations of oral history that says that we've been here and that we will continue to be here. I don't have any references because, again, it's oral history. And these are things that I try my best to teach what I've learned, to gather the information of the people, the elders that are out there, the younger people who are trying to absorb this knowledge, who are trying to not forget our identity and to continue this oral historical knowledge. And it's very hard, and especially in this day and age. And we're trying to capture everything that's out there, and we're trying to capture it through video, through recordings, voice recordings, and doing what I'm doing right now is just talking about it and spreading this information, because it really is important. And I wish there was more Indigenous youth that was present here, because it's something that's much needed. And I just wanted to share that this is something that I had thought about with looking at this book. And I really did not expect to be so absorbed into a book that just randomly picked up, but it's what it is. And I don't know what to say much more about the Grand Canyon, but that it's really spectacular, and it's worth fighting for, it's worth saving, it's worth protecting. And there are people that have connections to it, and we are alive as indigenous people. We're here, we're around the canyon, we're within the canyon, we'll always be there presently. And yeah, I don't know what else to say to you guys, but I've shared as much as I could right now. And yeah, it's thinking about the future. You know, there's a lot of concern about climate change, water usage. The water is getting low down there. Vases is starting to disappear, which is really sad. And my first time seeing Vases, I cried because something spoke to me there. But my last visit a couple months ago, I saw that Vases was disappearing, and I cried again because a lot of these places are not going to be the same, and they're going to be forever changed. And we've heard from many people already that Grand Canyon is always changing. It's always, you know, in the blink of an eye, it's millions of years next that's going to come up, and how is it going to look then? But for the time that we have right now, we have to do what we can to preserve it and to remember the people that call this place home, and to not forget them within these pages of books and history that is presented before us. So, thanks.
Thank you, Sarana Riggs. Yes, please, Steve. You don't pose it on the mic, please. Please.
So I wonder maybe if you had any comments about how the Park Service is maybe embracing or not embracing more. You know, for a long time, indigenous knowledge was not really seen in park interpretation or so on. But it seems like maybe there's more interest in that. But I don't know if it's maybe happening at a rate that you would like to see, or if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Previous to being here, I was working at the Grand Canyon Trust, and I was there for 6 years, working within the Grand Canyon program with my former boss, Roger Clark. And one of the things that we really strive to work on is that education of indigenous voice. And the park is very open to providing that education and to instilling a type of curriculum education there at the park. And how do we go about that? What do we talk about? And so when we look at what needs to be discussed at Grand Canyon, we got to look at all aspects of it. First, we got to look at what Grand Canyon looks like right now. I mean, when you're there, all the discussions are about Powell. It's about, you know, all the people who have explored the place, who have conquered the canyons, the side canyons, the water, you know, making it to this very outdoorsy adventure theme. And that's not what it's about. And we need to change that, and we need to look at, you know, again, looking at the education of the place. And it's not just about Powell and others who have explored it, but looking at the interpretation and the arts and craft and the food that's there, and that says nothing about indigenous, the people that are there. What I hear from people is, well, we're surrounded by reservations. How come there's no natives here? How come there's no Indians here? Or you get people who are not knowledgeable about culture, and they just look at us as TV Indians, stereotypical Indians, and they ask, where is our teepees? Where do we still travel in wagons? And all those different things. And that's something that we gotta take out of there, and we gotta incorporate more indigenous people, more workers, not just at the lower levels of maintenance custodians. It's good for interpreters, but we need more people that are in administration to make these changes, and we got to incorporate more food that represent the different tribes of the area, and we got to. I mean, this is these are ideas from people that we've talked to a lot. And there's a group called the Intertribal Centennial Conversation Group that is currently working with the Grand Cañon National Park on making these changes. And then it's not just there at the South Rim or North Rim level, but looking at concessionaires that are on the ground interacting with people, river rafters, hiking guides, air tours, and all of that, and even the transportation that's being used there within Grand Canyon. How do we incorporate video into those modes of transportation, or how do we put more people on the river? Maybe a native-based river rafting company, or more tours out there that are indigenous-based. So those are some of the things. So we look at the 3 targets of education, interpretation, stewardship management, and I just forgot the other one. But those are the things that we're looking at. That's when I left the trust, but still, for my own self, that's something that I'm still trying to work on. Yeah.
Looks like we have one more question. We'll take it. Go ahead, please. Let me give you the mic. Forgive me. So our online audience can also hear your question.
Hey, hi, thank you. Lately, the Havasupai tribe has really asked river runners and others on the river not to move up Havasu Creek and not even to stop there. I'm just wondering how you might feel about that.
Okay, this kind of falls into a line of out of respect of other tribes not to speak for them, because that's really hard. And as for myself, as a Diné person, I have to respect what their wishes are. And if I know that for Havasupai, they're one of the tribes that are really going through this COVID situation strictly, and not taking it with a grain of salt, because they're worried about their health, and they're very few in their tribe, and I feel like their need for safety and protection is really important. And I mean, look at history. We look at genocide. We look at assimilation. We look at all of those things, and we talked about manifest destiny. Just that was briefly talked about, and it's not. We need to change that mindset of going into somebody's area, going into somebody's space, and just like being dominant. We need to respect what the tribe wishes and the people wish. And yeah, I understand that it's a beautiful area. I miss Havasupai. I miss going into those canyons. I miss that. I miss going from the river up to that canyon, and it is beautiful. And there's a lot to be said about that area, but there's also a lot of other places that are within Grand Canyon that also need to be respected. What Havasupai did in asserting their right of not having people go into their space is something to be considered, because on my last trip, when we were at, where were we at? In many different places of the canyon, we see that those are sacred spaces of either Navajo or Kaibab Paiute or Wallapai, and when I'm there, I see that, to me, it just looks like a tourist destination site, and you have people that want to see it, see the beauty of the place, and experience the falls that are there, or the blue water, or the petroglyphs, or the granaries, or all the different things that are within Grand Canyon that are remnants of our ancestors. But there also is a time and a space where we also have to give reverence and respect to those spaces. And those conversations that we had with our indigenous youth on my last trip was, why do we even have this place open if it's sacred to us? why are we allowing people to come to these places? Why can't we just close it off and just leave it as is for our own selves and not let people go there? And that was a very eye-opening thought of Indigenous youth speaking on this. And I know that it would be a controversial one because people view it as, well, Grand Canyon is a public space and it should be seen, felt, and used by everybody. And I get that. And it's beautiful. And it's beautiful down at the bottom of the canyon. It's beautiful at the top of the canyon. But again, it goes back to Indigenous people. This is their place of origin. This is where they originated from. And when they pass on, this is where they're going to go back to. In mainstream society, we don't see ourselves recreating or playing at the graveyards. I mean, it's the same thing as being in the Grand Canyon. We got to give respect to that space. When we're in church and we go to the grandest of all churches, anywhere in the world, we're not climbing on it. We're not yelling. We're being very respectful to these places, and we're looking at the beauty of these churches, these great buildings that were built by amazing architects, and we see that, but we also give respect to that. And Dutton also talks about how the canyon is also looked at in many places as these great architectures that are simulated out there in the world, and it's the same. Yeah, that brought something to me because that's how we view the Grand Canyon. That's our church. That's our mother, and we have to be very respectful for her. So going back to your question, it just goes to it's what Havasupai wants to do, and I know it's hard to grasp. And I read all the little comments on Facebook in regards to that, but it's just something to be considered about.